What's your sign mean, Joe?
He's also.
No, you're muted. Turn your mute off.
I said it means I'm a loser and a sucker for wearing this uniform. I just want to go on record for that.
Really?
Hey, Timmy, how are you?
No, that's not right.
Good.
I think you're a hero, Joe, for wearing that uniform. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Ross.
Yeah.
What's the uniform? I can't see
I
it.
think it's a Marine.
Oh.
Okay, he's doing good.
Bumped into him in the
Yeah.
grocery store.
Actually, well, you know what, you probably bumped into him and don't even know it because with mask on, which, you know, his hair gives him away though.
I think I read
That's
it.
what.
All right, we're gonna get started here shortly. Believe we do have a quorum. And so we'll get started. Mr. Chapman, are we all set to go on your end?
Yes, Pat will be joining us. He's up at the Public Works meeting right now, so, but we can get started.
Sure, sounds good. All right, I'd like to call to order the Finance Committee. It is Tuesday, September 15th. It's 5:31, and I'm going to take roll call. Mr. Salgado present, Mr. Hoffman,
Present.
Mr. Girl, I don't know if he's in attendance. Nope. Mr. Fiducia, is he in? No. Mr. Schultz, he was on there momentarily, but I don't see he's online. Mr. McDonald,
Present.
Mr. Butita.
Here.
All right, let the record reflect, we do have a quorum. Mr. Chapman, was there anyone signed up for public comment?
No,
All right, I do apologize if you see my screen's black. Actually, I just got done working here, and so I just logged on. And once again, my laptop does not have a camera on it, so therefore it's in black there. So I apologize for that. Moving on to our next item, which is our favorite topic of discussion at this point in time, is a 2021 budget discussion and recommendation. I know Mr. Chapman has been talking with Mr. Thompson on potential closing the gap with revenue and expenditure. So I'll defer the time to Mr. Chapman to walk us through the packet that was submitted to us. Mr. Chapman.
okay, thank you. As I mentioned, Mr. Thompson should be down here shortly. He wanted to make some comments, but given it's such a nice night out, I'm sure people don't want to sit around here all night. But let me just get started on some issues that we looked at. If you remember, the two funds, the 1% and the Public Safety Sales Tax Fund, we were about a little over $6.1 million short of, in terms of those two funds, revenues versus expenditures. We went back and looked at a number of different items, seeing if we could do some different things to reduce that particular deficit. This is kind of a package thing. We put all these particular items together, and if you go to page, let's see here, page 4 in the packet that we sent out, this will give you a list of the items that we're I guess proposing as far as revenue increases or expenditure reductions in those two funds to get that deficit down to a more reasonable number. I'll go through these real quick. The first item is we had some additional funds that we recognized in one of our debt service funds, so we're able to reduce our debt service transfers by $40,000 in the general fund. We've incorporated into the budget in the general fund levy the additional PTEL extension increase of $900,000. The host fee, we've also incorporated a transfer of unused fund balance monies in the host fee, which is $1 million. Item 4, we have a county automation fund that can be used to fund either IT maintenance or equipment. We're recommending that at least this year we utilize the money that we did budget in there, which is about the amount of revenue that we take in, $300,000 to fund certain IT expenses, software contracts, hardware contracts, maintenance, etc. That would fall within the definition that we're talking about. Item 5, we do have some recorder's office personnel that we could transfer to the. Okay. Going back to item 5, we do have certain recorded office personnel that we feel that could be funded out of the document fee fund. It's a separate special revenue fund that we have. That would be, for those two individuals, be 73,000. Item 6, we looked at the contingency that we put in the general fund for personnel, and originally that amount was 300,000. We reduced that by 150,000, given we went back and recalculated, plus certain departments had already incorporated some increases into their budget, so we're able to reduce that. Item 7, we had some discussions with the highway funds, Carlos Molina, in terms of their budget, and we talked to them about some reductions that could possibly be made, which they were agreeable to. This would allow us to move 300,000 from the highway levies over to the general fund levy. Item 8, we reduced the county jail budget by $500,000. The sheriff agreed to pay certain medical bills for the inmates out of the commissary fund, which we're thankful for. PSB budget, we did reduce that overall budget to reflect some reductions in the utility costs and repair costs, 40,000. We also looked at the building maintenance utility cost, and because of the reduced cost for natural gas and somewhat the electricity cost, we're recommending a $100,000 reduction in that particular budget. Item 11, we're recommending a reduction of 150,000 in the health insurance fund, which is, or not the health insurance fund, but what's budgeted for general fund departments and the administrative department, and also the 1%, 150,000 in each fund, because we've seen reduction in usage by the employees, and also we've just renegotiated a new pharmacy contract, which will go into effect next year, which should considerably reduce our pharmacy cost. We also looked at some of the revenue items. Again, the federal prisoners, based on the numbers that we're seeing right now, we've increased that amount up by 600,000. That reflects a total revenue of $3 million, which is about 102 average daily population. I think right now it's 115, somewhere in that area. So we just used an average of 102. And then item 13, we also looked at, we got some updated actual amounts from the current fiscal year, and factor those into the revenue estimates for fiscal year 2021, which I've listed there, and it's about $500,000 that we incorporated in there. We also added, included in that, some additional IT services that Gus feels he'll generate this year, just because of some of the activities in the departments that he services. So if you take those total changes, it's about $4.8 billion. So that's all those, and I'll just continue on, I guess. If you go to, let's see here. If you go to page 2, this is kind of a summary page that reflects the changes in the two individual funds, the general fund, the revenue changes that we made at about $3.2 million in revenue. The expenditure reductions, $1,353,000. So it's actually, it says revised shortfall, but it's actually a positive number of $5,752,000. Under the 1% fund, just a revenue change of $110,000. for the 1% tax. We reduced expenditures by 150,000. So that revised shortfall is a little under 7.1 million. So if you take those two numbers together, we're down to about 1.3 million shortfall in those two particular funds. In order to look at, if we applied that $1.3 million back against the reduction or the expenditures, if you go to page 1, if you remember, we talked about what we considered. There's certain expenditures that really you can't reduce if you're gonna, go through a reduction process because of statutory, because of contractual issues, just because you have to fund something in the courts, things like that. Those exempt expenditures are similar to what I had passed out previously. I think they're reflected on pages 6 to 9. But in terms of the totals, we looked at everything. It's a little under $30 million. If you look at the budgeted expenditures in those two funds, it's about 88.7, the revised number. So we have what we call, let's say, expenditures subject to reduction would be about 59 million. So if you take that at 59 million and you take that 1.3 million that's required to balance the budget, that it comes up with a reduction percentage of about 2.2%, which is almost like a turnover factor that you would consider, especially in the personnel area, because you're always going to have turnover in the personnel areas over the course of the year, especially in your larger departments and so on. If you go to page 3, this is where we kind of went down by department and took what the total budget was, the revised budget, based on the expenditure reductions that we did. You take out those exempt amounts that we talked about for the different reasons, and then come up with a amount subject to reduction. A couple spelling errors there. So you apply that 2.2% reduction, you come up with about the $1,310,000 that we're looking for in terms of reductions by department. So, and again, that takes into consideration expenditures that you really can't reduce. So, let's see. I think that's it for right now. Mr. Salgado, Mr. Thompson's here. If he could maybe speak to some issues that he wanted to bring up.
Yes, please. Mr. Thompson.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks. I was up in Public Works, and that's why I was a little bit late, so I apologize for that. I just wanted to say, I spoke with department heads and elected officials today that, I'm in my 4th week here now, and a little bit late to the budget process, but I wanted to thank the elected officials and the department heads for really working with Steve and I to try to balance this budget. It's my goal, and I know it's Steve's goal, to not present a budget to the county board that is not in balance, but we also have to balance the needs of the various departments that we're trying to fund. And so, we started off with a little over $6 million gap between the requested budgeted expenditures and the projected revenues. So over the course of the last 2 weeks, Steve and I have re-examined revenue line items. we've tried to adjust revenue line items based on the most current data that we're getting from the state and other sources of revenue that, so we're adjusting these numbers as best we can based on, real live data. We also have met with department heads and asked if there are areas in their budgets based on their requested budgets where they would be able to make reductions in their budgeted requests. And several departments have stepped up to the table. And so we've been able to, with a combination of increased expenditures, and I know that it includes the PTAC or the PTAC, PTEL.
Yeah.
It includes that. It also includes reduced expenditures. We're still at a little over $1 million gap. So I think there's options to deal with that. Our goal was to not dip into the fund balance, to balance. I mean, it would be easy to just say, okay, well, apply $1 million of your fund balance to, balance this off and we're good to go. But I think that is short-sighted, and, we're already at a level where you don't want to reduce your fund balance any further than where it's at. I think we're projecting around 25%, and that is what I would say is kind of a bare minimum. So, it includes, like I said, the PTEL, it includes a little of the, what is
Host
the,
fee?
yeah, what fee?
Host fee.
Host fee. Yeah, I'm still getting used to the
Terminology.
different funds. So there's some sacrifice, and there's probably, some that won't support, the way I look at it is that there needs to be a little bit of sacrifice from everyone to get this thing done. And I don't know if board members say, no, we're not going to touch the PTEL or the host fee, find more cuts, then I think you're really going to start to sacrifice your services, your service level. I think we've made good progress. Yeah, we need to do a little bit more, but I think we're a lot further ahead today than we were 2 weeks ago.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson and Mr. Chapman. I do appreciate the comments. I do want to highlight as again, thank you for clarifying the CPI PTEL about 900K. Then the general fund for the host fees about $1 million. So we're looking at about $1.9 million that we would essentially use as part of revenue increase or to capture some of those expenditures. So that's pretty much where we stand at this point in time. If not, if we take the PTEL out, it's $1 million short that we would have to cut. So it'd be another $2 million to have a balanced budget. Or like that was said, the reserves, we don't want to go in that direction. I do have a question though for Mr. Chapman or Mr. Thompson. Based on where we're at, where would we be percentage-wise on the reserves? Would we be at that 25%, less than that? Where are we at on that?
Yeah, I'd have to go back and recalculate where we're looking at for the end of this fiscal year. I think when we originally did it, we were looking at like 27 or 28%, but you also have to take into consideration the issue with, River Bluff impacting that number also, which I don't hopefully we'll have some additional information on Thursday relating to that. But I mean, just looking at these two funds, I think it was in the neighborhood of 28%. But again, I can't tell you an exact number right now.
Okay, well, I would like to get a picture on that as well, at least
Yep.
to give some of the board members some breathing room, as you know, some may express some disconcern with the PTEL piece or reductions across the board. So from that standpoint, I do appreciate the exercise you guys took about the 2.2%. What that would look like, what departments across the board, if we were to go that direction. It's something to think about and discuss here. Are there any other questions regarding what was presented here? The other question, yes, before I go to Mr. McDonald, the other question is, have we informed the departments of this information? I know it's out there when it comes to the meeting request. So just wanted to ask that question to Mr. Chapman, Mr. Thompson.
Not at this time. We would do that probably tomorrow.
Yeah,
Once
and
we,
that's what it was my thinking. Essentially, it's being presented here in whatever direction. Now that it's being discussed, I think that information needs to be disseminated to the corresponding departments so they're aware of it. Like I said, no one's saying that that's the direction we're going based on the board, but you know, that's something that's out there for them. Mr. McDonald, you had your hand up.
A couple of notes that I've taken. I know that this isn't going to solve our budget shortfall, Steve, by any means, but when you bail out of jail, you got to pay an extra $50. But if you go to the circuit clerk, then you don't have to pay the $50. I think that's a loophole we should close. Again, we're not going to balance the budget with it, but it's revenue.
I don't know if you can close it.
Okay.
I don't know. We can check, but
Yeah, I'd appreciate if you could check on that and see if State's Attorney's Office, do you happen to know the answer on that? Or can we charge the $50 at the clerk's office like we do in the jail?
I can tell you that fee has never been routinely collected because it has been looked upon as a tax. And with bond reform, I don't know that we've ever collected a substantial amount regarding that fee. But certainly the sheriff's office could weigh in if Rick has that information currently.
We collected.
I'm sorry, Marilyn, could you repeat the question?
Yes,
Rick,
the question
when
was, I'm sorry, you want to do that, Mr. McDonald?
Oh, you can say Attorney Hatch-Ross.
The question was regarding that $50 fee that was added a couple of years ago for defendants regarding warrants and posting a bond. My response to Mr. McDonald is that we've never really been able to collect a significant amount of that. And I doubt that we are able to collect any through the clerk's office.
I don't know the answer to that question, so I will have to check on that and get back to you.
Yeah, that's.
You
Sandy Gorals here, if it's okay, I'd like to hear
We
what
do
Tim.
collect on everybody that bonds out. There is a $50 charge. Now there is occasions that the money, we don't hold them in. The supervisor will waive that, but that's rarely done.
Okay, so
But they can
typically,
go to the clerk's office and they don't pay the fee.
so in the jail, you do collect it historically, with the clerk's office, they do not. It's just something to check on. Again, we're not gonna balance the budget with that. It's just something I looked at.
Yep.
I see we still have $610,000 in the public safety building. Can we convert it to a dry system and shut it down and just, I don't understand why it still costs $600,000 for something we're not using.
well, in terms of that, there are a couple, when I got into that budget, there was some cleaning expenses that were coming out of there that shouldn't be coming out of there. In fact, one of the amendments that we're proposing is, let's see here. I think it's $115,000 that was being charged to that budget for cleaning. So that should have gone to the other building maintenance budget. So that reduces that by 115, plus reducing the utilities down by another 40. Part of the issue is we still have to maintain the basement area for the coroner and all that. he's still down there. So you're paying utilities for that. Plus, I think the first floor, however, we're gonna look at that once the city's out of there, which is supposed to be now, from what I understand, at the end of the year.
Yeah, we passed where they were supposed to leave
Yeah.
last March.
Right. Yeah.
So they should shoulder that significant portion of their costs because we asked them to leave and they're still there. And then I'm fine helping them out, but not at our cost or our expense.
But I think we did have a discussion with Sean about that, and I think, you know, part of the problem is still the issue of, you know, how the heating and cooling system are in terms of the vertical as opposed to the horizontal, so. But we'll continue to look at that, but those two items does reduce that budget down by, I think, 155,000, so it would reduce it down to, and we still have to provide cleaning over there for the corner, the morgue, all that. Morgue's cleaned every day and that type of thing.
They don't, why do we have an outside service clean it and why can't they? And I guess I should, a question better for the corner. I apologize.
No.
The other question I have is regional planning. It was 746,000. We're down to 687. I guess my thought is everybody's tired of hearing me say public safety is first. There's no sense of planning for the future. People don't feel safe in staying here. So I care about the sheriff's budget and the state's attorney's budget as well. Is there any more that we could look at in regional planning to get us through this pandemic?
Not really, because that includes your building inspectors, your zoning people, that type of thing. You need those people. I mean,
Okay.
we have I think one inspector for each trade, and you know, the zoning people, the counter people that handle all the permits that come in and that.
Okay.
So it's I mean, they've reduced. I think previously we had a lot more folks in there. It was up around $1 million. So.
And I've got to admit, I read regional planning. I first think of RP,
Yeah, no,
Regional
no,
Planning
no,
Council.
it's not
So I thought that was a lot of that.
No, that's a building and planning. That's Chris Dornbush's area.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all I had. Thank you, Chairman.
All right. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Butita.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just wanted to understand this correctly, that with the proposed revenue increases and expenditure reduction, pages 4 and 5, that leaves us with a balance of 1.3 million,
A gap.
a gap of 1.3 million.
Yep.
The 2.2% cut of all departments solves that problem?
It would reduce that.
Okay.
But that, you know, we're not proposing that at this point. It, you know, we just did I think Steve did the exercise to see,
Okay,
so.
I understand.
I think if you go to page 3, John, that reflects where if you apply the formula there.
But you're right, you're
What the
right.
department's reductions would be.
You're right, Mr. Butita, though, to answer your question, yes. And how, if we were to go down that path, it would be proposed as like a salary savings. You know, so through attrition, most departments, not all, but, you know, a lot of departments can absorb a certain amount of salary savings through attrition, through, you know, regular turnover in departments, and it's not uncommon. And in a lot of cases, it can be achieved. In not all instances can it be.
Okay. But in essence, if we do the 2.2, this is a balance.
It would be, yeah.
Okay. Very good, I understand.
All right. Is there any other questions? Yes, Mr. Arena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The increase in the property tax levy, what would that translate to, like the cost of a homeowner, like per 100,000 of value? Do we have that statistic?
I think that was,
I actually did.
go ahead, Mr. Chapman.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I did calculate that out. What amount, if you got $150,000 house, it would amount to a little over $9 for that particular individual house. You know, you have to remember, you know, the county has not taken any if you want to call it inflationary increases, probably over the last 7 or 8 years. So really the value of that the property tax levy money that we are getting has been, in essence, devalued by inflation over that time period. So, when the state set up the tax caps and that, they basically said you couldn't raise your taxes. They allowed for an inflationary increase and any new growth, and that was it. So if you don't take that inflationary increase, then you, in essence, are losing the value, or the value of that levy becomes less. So it's about $9
For the whole year
Yep.
Yes,
in total.
yes,
Okay, great. Thank you for that information.
based on the 900,000. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
All right, any other questions on this? Go ahead, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you. Just a comment. I will not support the P-TEL. I understand it's only $9 per 150. We already paid too much in property taxes. I understand I'm part of a board of 20, but I'll be a no on the P-TEL. Thank you.
Sounds good. Noted, duly noted. On this aspect of it, I'd like to continue with this process the way it is currently right now. So I'd just advise Mr. Thompson, Mr. Chapman to send out this information to the departments and start having discussions potentially about the 2.2% reduction, and see where we can agree or disagree, or whatever the case may be, concerns, questions, comments, that direction. Hopefully, we can get some alignment of that sort. And I think $1.9 million is quite extensive, supporting the expenditures in the sense of trying to close the gap from that $6 million, as Mr. Thompson kind of alluded at the beginning. So it's a give and take, understood. And that's why I'd like to know where the percentage that we might end up with that $1.3 million deficit, where that would put us. I'd like to know that information. I'd also like to hear from the departments, in a sense, if there's concerns, questions, and what we can do to close the gap. I'd like to, if we could, have a balanced budget for this fiscal cycle. I know it's unpopular, P-TEL. I think it's the right time to do so. It's $900K. That puts another $900K that we have to absorb some shape or form. And so this is a good opportunity, especially with everything that's transpired. So I'd like to continue with that. I know Mr. Chapman talked to me about what's the next step. Obviously Thursday, I believe, Mr. Chapman, correct, there's another finance meeting. And then Tuesday, we're planning to maybe hold a special county as a whole to talk a little bit about the budget with all county board members. Next Tuesday or Monday is kind of what we were looking at. So that's kind of where the process is going with this. And we hope we can make some time there and create some areas that we can negotiate and come to agreement on, and hopefully have a balanced budget. That's the proposal for that. And that's where we're at. So any other questions that we have for Mr. Chapman, Mr. Thompson at this point in time? Mr. Chapman, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I have a couple other things, just for everybody's information. I know Bert's not here, but I know in the past, Bert has kind of advocated, doing something with the public safety sales tax as far as putting it back on the referendum for some sort of an increase to assist us. I mean, this budget issue isn't going to go away. As you know, I don't even if the economy does come back, I don't think it's going to generate enough revenue to take care of the needs of the county. And especially when 80% of your budget, general fund budget, is public safety, which includes the courts. So I think, you know, you need to start thinking long-term in that respect. You know, if you did want to put something on the ballot in February, you would have to do it by December 7th of 2020, which would probably mean this board. As far as the April election, it would be January 19th, I think is the due date in terms of actually putting something on the referendum. So in that respect, you know, again, who knows if something would pass or not. I mean, it's hard to say. But again, I guess it's how it's addressed by the community and by the supporters and so on. But just to give you those two dates in terms of that particular item, because you don't have an election next November, I don't believe. So you wouldn't be able to put anything on until the following March. So it's another year away. So the other thing I'd like to talk about, I did send out to everybody on last Thursday, I think it was, information on the Sheriff's Department budget. I had the Finance Department go back and look at those particular budgets based on the actual expenditures going back to fiscal year 2011. We also took out the health insurance expenses, so we had a number that could be comparative throughout all the years. If you remember back in, I think, 2018, we started budgeting the health insurance expenses elsewhere besides the departmental budget. So we factored that out of there to give you some comparison numbers. So hopefully everybody got that particular document, and I think it will answer questions that were talked about at the board meeting, I believe, when we were talking about the sheriff's budgets and so on. And you can see for 2020, we projected out what we anticipate the sheriff's spending. 2021, the number that we included is what the sheriff had proposed, for the budget. So if you have time, take a look at that document. It's a little interesting in terms of what's happened over the years. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Mr. Schultz, you have your hand up.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I apologize. I was having trouble with my audio, so I logged out. I got logged back in. But for the minutes, just if you'd reflect that I joined the meeting right as Mr. Salgado was handing off the conversation to Mr. Chapman at the beginning of the meeting.
Yep.
But a couple things. First of all, Steve, thank you for doing that work in terms of the sheriff's information. That was helpful. One of the questions that I have is just kind of floating out there is, how do funds that we don't see reporting on, how do those funds like the commissary fund and any other funds that have come up in the audit process where the sheriff is handling money, but that's not coming through the normal accounting system, you know, what would the dollars be on that? Have those dollars substantially changed over the same time frame that you reported to us? And that's not a critical issue, it's just a curiosity, but I do think it's potentially pertinent if those numbers have substantially changed over the time frame. But then jumping to the point that you made, I appreciate, Mr. Chapman, you pointing out that we're not solving the problem long term. You know, we're getting to a budget that, you know, critical mass will be there. You all know my position in terms of where I'll be on this one. I think I won't be in favor of the budget as it's presented, but probably will find the critical mass of others who will, for reasons I've already stated. But the bigger issue is, okay, you got $1 million of post fee money. That's unsustainable. You have salary increases that are contractually, you're obligated to that next year, the following year. And there's systemic issues that have to be resolved. And, you know, Mr. Thompson, you've committed to jumping in early after this budget process is closed into the solution side of those issues. I'm grateful for that. I really do think we have to start early and get after it and and systemically build a balanced budget. This is not a balanced budget for a variety of reasons. It represents a great effort, and I'm not trying to be critical. I think you guys have done a good job. My observation, which is fairly obvious as you look at how we closed the gap, the $7 million gap got closed primarily on the revenue side. And frankly, that's the easy part. And while, I'm glad you came up with things post fee and otherwise to do that, I do think it is going to require a lot harder work after this budget cycle to really get at the heart of the matter and give us a sustainable future. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. I agree 100% with that. Any other questions, comments regarding this? Yes, Mr. Butita.
New business, are we there?
Yes, we will in a minute. I just wanted to ask questions if anybody had on what we're currently talking about, which is the budget right now. All right. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Chapman. Yeah, go ahead.
No, that's the one item I also wanted to bring up. I did attach to the packet that we sent out, the budget that was received from the Mental Health Tax Board. And we're going to need to have some more discussions on that with them over the next couple of days regarding the numbers that they submitted. I talked to Pat about them, and we'll have some further information on that. But that's what was submitted by the Mental Health Tax Board,
which is about 13 million, right? To a point.
Correct.
Yep.
Which I see them spending that next year. I don't know if they just, plug the number in there to get to the 13 million. I think that's the number I gave them as far as revenue goes. It's about half of that, half cent is about half of what we take in the public safety sales tax. So I think they just, like I said, plug the number in there. So we need to have some further discussions on that so we can bring something in on Thursday night.
Yeah, and I did talk to Mr. Neighbors since he sits on the board. Thanks for Mr. Chapman reaching out and letting me know that. So I did reach out to him. He's saying that it's probably the number that you just took, Steve, and kind of factored it in as kind of their budget that they're supposed to collect essentially on that half cent. So more to come. I told Tim to reach out and have communications with them because obviously discussions need to be had on what direction and realistically from a budget standpoint where they'll be for this next cycle coming up. So, but yeah, hopefully you can get in touch with them and hopefully hash out some things on the mind frame on, the proposed budget that they submitted to us. Because I know there'll be questions on that. Yep.
Can I just make one comment?
Yep.
I think the issue that comes into play is I don't know if the county board has necessarily indicated that they want the entire amount spent by the mental health board. There may be other programs that they may choose to fund that would be outside of the jurisdiction of that mental health board, as long as it's being spent on mental health programs. So I think that's something we have to look at.
That's something
existing programs.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's something that we need to address with them and the board and internally determine on that aspect of it. I don't know what their bylaws are or what their strategic plans are. And that's why, I kind of touched base with Tim. I said that he needed to follow up with them, make sure that everything's on board and, realistically where they're coming in for next year and what they're trying to do. I know that they're still in the planning phases and the startup, there's startup right now costs that they're incurring, but I don't know realistically where what their milestones will be for next year. You know, is it at half capacity, 75%, whatever it is. So I just told Tim to touch base with them and see what we can come up with, and also have discussions with Mr. Chapman, Mr. Thompson on what they can propose on that aspect of it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions regarding whether it's the mental health board or budget or the budget itself? All right, seeing none. Is there any other matters or new business? Mr. Bitita, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. As you may or may not know, I'm the county appointed board member on the Brave Board, which is the Rockford Area Venue and Entertainment Board, BMO, Coronado, Davis Park. Well, I had some communication with them. Apparently, we have an agreement with them for parking. When they have overfull parking, they use downtown county lots. So obviously, we've got financial problems that they've got even bigger ones. They're at zero revenue since the middle of March. So what they've asked me to look into is suspending that agreement. And I'm not sure if it's an intergovernmental agreement, an IGA,
Yeah,
or
I
if
think it
it's
was done as part of the agreement with the parking deck over there.
that's what they said. There was some
I think it's like
$7,500 quarterly.
a quarter.
Yeah, 7,500 quarterly. So they paid the first quarter. Well, in any event, I won't get into the details. What I would suggest is that they're suggesting a suspension of that agreement. If we could put that on the agenda for the next meeting where it makes sense, maybe not during the budget process, but as soon as possible. And then if we can investigate whether that requires county board approval,
Yeah,
or if that's just an administrative function.
Okay.
yeah, they contacted me about that, and to be honest with you, I haven't had a chance.
Sure.
In fact, I was gonna address it with this committee once we got through this.
Yeah, but at the next available
That's it.
convenient time, it's fine.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you for that information. We'll look into that. Anything else, any other matters? All right, seeing none, just Mr. Chapman, we're on Thursday, correct? Just I'll let the board know.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So we'll see each other on Thursday. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Mr. Bitita and
So moved. Second.
Mr. Schultz. Thank you. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Thank you very much. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Good night.